Good job.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Great to see everybody again. We got some new faces out here too. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you again to the committee for all the work. As we continue to move forward. So we have, as always, a lot of agenda and a lot of things to cover. Just a reminder that on the website is all the work the committee has been engaged in since last September when we started meeting. So tonight we want to go back through the timeline, which is really important. It's hard to, at least it is for me, to think about things we're talking about now are really 5 years from now. I mean, that's a long lead time. Things we're talking about tonight, we're looking at a vote in May of 26, right? So timeline is really critical as we think about all these things and as part of decision making. We went through the room utilization. We talked about that last time. We wanted to make sure we had that. There's boards over there with all the rooms labeled, proposed, that fit the program. I know it's really small and we provided everybody, so if anyone wants to take a closer look, everything is labeled by program on what's coming over. It's important to remember, we've got 14 classrooms coming over from Lakeview, which really makes the extension or the new construction really necessary to be able to get that in. So everything, and we'll walk through, is over there if anybody wants to take a look. Talk about the BCS renovations, and Dave and I were talking on the way in. What I have in here is really just what's highlighted. It's not the full scope of everything. It's what we determined red. It's absolutely at end of life, or it's health, safety, and it's things that need to be addressed. So it's kind of a summary of the big things we talked about last time about like what's going to be included. This is the high level, absolutely necessary mechanical, electrical, plumbing, safety things that you'll see in here. There's more behind them. Remember, the whole BCS list was incredibly long. So we wanted to highlight the really big items that are super important to make sure they all get taken care of. And then we want to talk about the recommendations as we move forward, most of which we talked about over the past meeting or so. Okay. So again, potential schedule, and this is really important, as I said. We move forward now. It's going to be at least, based on the current calendar, 6 months to be able to do the SED review. And plus, we have to get final BAU counts. We have to do final calculations on the MCA, revisit all the numbers back in January. That's a long time from now just to get all that started, and hopefully get everything in order to be able to vote next May on a project to move forward. And assuming that vote, you can see construction can start. Construction can start in fall of 2027. Remember, it's a year from when you vote to when you start, right? So it's 2 years out even before there's a shovel in the ground. It's just a lot of time to get approvals. And then once everything's approved, award bids, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a runway in engaging in this work. The plan was 2 phases. Once again, we can't do everything at once, and we really need to make there's swing space available. So when we do renovations in the room, we have the other classrooms available to use. Depending on how things go, could finish a little bit earlier, but the reality is we're still looking at June 23rd. So it's a minimum 5 years as we get in. And again, the boards are over there if you want to take a closer look. Just an aerial view of what's proposed. Same thing that we've been talking about in terms of project-wise. We look like new construction back here. This hall is labeled as a maybe. We'll see how things come. Mike, I don't know if you want to speak to the connector. Was the potential connector?
Yeah, the idea there was because the extremely remote end of that elementary addition, those kids would be spending a lot of time walking through the existing facility to get to the gym and the cafeteria. So we wanted to provide a connecting corridor to make it more direct and save on their time.
Well, we're still at concept with all of the pieces to this. So we labeled it, we added this, potentially could go in here once we'll look at cost and we'll look at everything else. It certainly makes really good sense in terms of circulation, volume circulation. Existing lower level, again, it's labeled over there. This is under current use. There's one space in here, extra for lack of a better word, It's used as ancillary space. It's the only ancillary classroom in the entire building. First floor plan with the addition. Again, there's the hall we were talking about. There's an option to get traffic that way. All of the elementary school spaces are labeled in here from pre-K up through 5, 2 sections deep. And again, a current configuration with the middle school and the high school classes as everything stands now. And the same thing, there is no second floor on the addition. The remainder of the high school classes, art room, et cetera, everything labeled on whose home is where, and it's essentially the current configuration as it's being used. Thoughts on the usage? I know that committee we talked about last time, we want to make sure we covered everything and we're very deliberate with the program pieces. Josh, I don't know if you want to speak to anything else from a program perspective or.
No, not now. I think we're.
Josh and Lee are happy, generally speaking.
You know, we're short, which we had a conversation about, and the original proposed project had 7 special ed rooms. This only has 4. Right, remember, we're keeping things as tight as possible. There's no room if there becomes a problem from the program perspective to continue to grow that, or we're moving the puzzle around inside as well. So from a program perspective, that part is smaller than what was originally proposed on the campus offsite.
From a construction standpoint, it makes more sense to go with just a single story rather than 2-story facilities and less foundation work.
Mike? Should we go with this?
It very well may. We batted around a couple of other ideas too, where the classrooms that project out the end, maybe they go in the courtyard along that corridor so that we make better use of the corridor. But the real purpose of this plan, it's not a final design by any means. It hasn't been reviewed with the teachers of the district or the administration, but it's to give us an idea of where we stand financially with the maximum cost allowance. So how we configure it in the end, that'll be determined during design meetings.
So your point, maybe it'll work on better and smaller footprint and go up and down. Yes,
Do you have any plans of activating the cafeteria?
I'm sorry, excuse me?
The cafeteria?
Yeah.
Any updates to that?
Yes, we're gonna speak to that in a couple slides. We're gonna get to renovations, thank you. Yes, we have lots of upgrades going to the cafeteria space.
Joe, you mentioned in one of the emails that we are not gonna have a pre-K, what we call recess where.
Oh, playground.
we're-
Yeah, there's not gonna be a separate pre-K one. The existing one, which I'll talk about in the renovations, is gonna get redone back here. If I'm right, Mike, that's the location for it, right?
Yep.
We all know the condition of the current, we gotta get the wood out there, and plus you gotta redo the entire site that it's on with the approved materials and all the rest of that. So there won't be a separate one. We originally showed it there, but this whole space should be done. So it's not that there won't be one, I probably should have been clearer about, they'll have the same access to the one that we're doing completely. So that is it on spaces and program. Everything is a home, everything is in the box, and it's a tight fit. So let's talk about renovations. Again, this isn't everything. We went through the BCS list and really first targeted what's absolutely necessary. There will be other things in here if the scope gets finalized. And it's really important to know. Every time we meet, I say it all the time. It's not definitive until it's definitive, right? Essentially, it's still a conceptual phase, but we know what really needs to be done. And I'll walk through some of that stuff right now. So in terms of site and envelope, I think this is really important as we look at the surfaces outside that need to get redone. So we're looking at that, repairing and replacing concrete and the asphalt in all the areas. Significant issues with the original 51 building. Concrete foundations have horizontal cracks, there's water infiltration, as we were talking about before. There are a lot of signs of inadequate reinforcement, Brick units are deteriorating around the window sills and the envelope, marble panel is warping, there's issues with all that. So all of the building envelope things will be addressed. Really important to close the building up and shore it up and make sure structurally everything's in order. The interior, there's only a couple of things that are really important for a couple of different reasons. Really comes down to the health safety matters. There's a lot of carpet that really needs to be redone. It's waiting on its lifestyle. So anywhere there's carpet, we want to make sure it comes up. There's rooms with really poor condition tile, BCT. So we want to target areas where it's a safety issue and anything related, and all of that's going to come up as well, and that'll be replaced. Mechanical systems, and this is really important. The original boilers from 1990 are at the end of the lifespan. The burners, the parts for the burners can't be sourced. This is an ongoing issue. When a boiler goes down, you can't get parts for the burners. The rooms serve from 1991 that have the unit ventilators. They need to be replaced, including the control boards. The rooms with the ceiling hung unit ventilators is the same issue. They also use a refrigerant that is not used anymore, especially not used in schools. Safe doesn't allow it. So all of these units need to be replaced. The lower floor rooms, same way. Unit ventilators don't have any relief air. That's got to get addressed. So there's all kinds of ductwork issues. And the bathrooms near the art addition need exhaust. The same thing with the ground floor. The music room is the same way. The ceiling hung unit ventilators, block, those need to be replaced. The ductwork needs to be done. The kitchen hood isn't type 1 for the griddle and the stoves. There's no makeup air for that, so that's going to be taken out and replaced. There's no exhaust and vapor capture for the dishwasher area. That's got to be all taken care of. Whatever's left in there, got all that out, replace all that, the proper ventilation, the proper ductwork. All the air handlers are beyond their useful life. And again, they're using that phased out refrigerant. All that's got to go as well. So the mechanicals, and my second slide of that, I'm sorry. The mechanical lift is substantive. You're really looking at getting all these systems that are expired at end of life, frankly, replaced. And doing a lot of work in that cafeteria there. I'll get to the plumbing part in a little bit in terms of makeup air handling, circulation, ventilation, etc. It's not in the dishwasher. There's nothing in there that's taking any of that. So that's all really important parts. Plumbing, which I briefly spoke to. From what we could tell, there's either isn't a grease trap or there's something wrong with the waste outlet because it currently needs to be skimmed or it's treated with chemicals. All that's got to come out. There's got to be grease traps got to go in. All the plumbing needs to be reworked. All the sanitary lines don't have floor sinks. They're connected directly into the sanitary system. That needs to be plumbed and taken care of. And there's an issue, again, safety issue with the mixing valve up in the chemistry room is beyond its life, and there's no floor drain. And if anybody ever needs a safety problem or student needs to use an eye wash or staff member using an eye wash, we have to make sure that is all up to where it needs to be. You know, it sounds like a small thing, but it's really an important thing. It's plumbing. Electrical?
Wait,
Oh, go ahead.
so does that mean that the current bathrooms everywhere that we won't touch that plumbing?
Only in certain areas, and I'm pretty sure it's the art addition spaces. It might get to that. Again, this is just immediate scope where things need to be immediately addressed. And we're trying to build out the budget. Okay? So maybe it will, once we get into the final design and the final, what everything will cost and the final what has to get done. This list is essentially, it has to be.
But you don't have like the lead pipes being replaced in the moment?
No, I don't think so, Mike. That wasn't in the original. Yeah, and the BCS, I'm trying to remember what the total BCS number was. It was almost, I don't have it in front of me, but the list to do everything, including those kinds of things, which the committee talked about for many months, was huge. So the goal Now was the exercise, what is an absolute must in terms of keeping the building, shoring up the building, keeping the systems the way they have to be. And then after that are a huge list of other items that can be done as well. But this is really health, safety, and security, critical things first.
Joe, can you share with a big audience here tonight, why we're just doing the bare minimum?
Yes, and the committee, to your credit, over many months now, and starting in September, can't do everything. The cost to do everything puts us back in the same problem that we had with the last referendum. Everything is not aidable, so the committee made a conscious decision to maximize the reimbursement that we get from the state to keep the cost of the project down. And so the more you exceed that, the greater the burden is on the local share. That's a really important point. You're only aided up, which we've been talking about for months now. Reimbursement happens up to a certain level that's determined by the state, and anything beyond that becomes local share. The committee made a conscious decision to maximize as much of the aidable expense first. Building condition survey. So it's required by the state. It's required every 5 years. Last October, the architects went through the building and completed it again. So we would have the most current data when we decided how, what would have to be done for the project. Something going.
We also talked about a middle ground between the absolute must be done and is aidable. And I don't recall, correct me if I'm wrong, that we made a definite decision not to look at some of those.
We did not.
Okay.
And part of what we'll talk about the recommendation is to show, be mindful and cognizant of where that line is. But I think I put in the recommendation, we know it's going to be exceeded. And what we want to try to avoid this time is making sure there isn't scope creep to the nth degree. There may be other necessary things, and once the numbers play out, and a conversation about that next February, of what we can, once they finally decide, Mike and his team sits down, like, this is the list of what's included and what it costs, what's left, and what do we think that we want to do.
Okay.
Okay? So to your point, there has been no, we never said there is a ceiling.
Thank you.
Sure. Electrical, there's circuits throughout the building that just need to be addressed. There's no visual fire alarms in the classroom, so all of that will be addressed. There's no carbon monoxide detection system that will be addressed, and we have several security items at a minimum that we want to make part of the project, hardening entrances and also a visitor. I don't know if anybody's seen the system before where you show your driver's license, and there's a very popular system where it runs it against state databases and keeps track of all visitor entry things. Strongly recommended. Now's the time to make sure that we do that as we're looking to do that work. So that is, to your point, Sharon, not everything, but a big chunk of where we have to start, right? We're talking about mechanical work, we're talking about structural work, we're talking about plumbing, electrical, these things that need to be done. The building can't continue to function on its current mechanicals. You're 35 years, you're at the end of life, you can't get parts for the guns for the boiler. These things need to be replaced. The issues with the kitchen need to be dealt with in terms of ventilation, in terms of fire suppression, in terms of all those pieces that have to do with what's really necessary. So as I went back through this list that all these things that we've been looking at since we got the BCS back in October, Dave and I were talking on the way in. 5 years, nobody's going to walk into this building. So, look at this brand new building. Right? There's nothing on here that isn't absolutely necessary. There really isn't. I can say with incredible confidence that there is no luxury item list of anything that we're talking about. Yes.
Are you saying that, I just want to clarify, because there's been so much pushback against anything being done?
I don't want to summarize these 7 months of work for the committee, but when we started the process in September, it was looking back at the original referendum, talking about what we thought the fatal flaws were with that. And the top two issues were location and cost. In the original referendum, which, as a quick overview, I think it was $28 million was out of pocket. Got no aid. And that's where the real cost came. So we spent a lot of time talking about what's aided and how things are aided. And it's always up to a level. To Sheriff's point, like we're not saying don't go above this level. What we're saying is, here's the level and your other project went to here, right? We're saying, here's the level, and with what needs to be done in terms of reasonableness that the community thinks is important, this is the space we want to be in here. Yes, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
After the first project was voted down, I foiled information from the state education department. Paperwork that I did, all of that, and one of the few things that they talked about was the role project. There was a question about, for example, they said the enrollment that we had to do those years was not this over what this should be allowed. And it asked about, we have the big force and schools, and they asked, how many teachers, and you said, well, not enough. And they said, anything over those things, we probably share. So then this goes to that's the kind of thing that they'll say. Another thing, for example, is in the school, it's proposed withdrawal, square changes. Several of those again, actually, over what was standard. They said that thing was, but I think it was 77.
770 is the minimum for, separate kindergarten is 1,100. 900 or 1,100, 1,100.
And then that would become a share, so, I just am wondering, like, I'm sure that this is all taken into consideration of the new plans before they go to the state, will we know that, we're in the public. So,
Yeah, those are all great points, and it goes exactly to the prior question. That this is very.
Joe, can I just comment real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
That, working directly with state ed, the extra gym space and the science classrooms, as well as many other things, were fully aided. I attribute that to my charisma with the commissioner.
We're going to have to, again, this is to the minimum point. What we're proposing is not out of question. We're proposing an addition that had twice as many rooms, a new auditorium and a pool. Then they would come back and say, you have absolutely no shot at getting any aid on additional things. So really, we expect it's too deep. The enrollment supports this. Expect that this would meet expectations from what they would see out of the project in terms of the new construction. Absolutely. Pleasure.
John, I just want to clarify what you said, because I don't know if that was understood. And that is that after many trips to state ed, the pieces that were, although typically those things might not have been aided fully, after many trips to state ed, those we had to give people things.
And we're gonna have to, until everything gets submitted, we're gonna have to go back down there and have these Joshes, lead it, of course, again. Just Commissioner so fond of you after the last 100 times you're down there. To have some real conversations, you keep twisting some arms to get as much aid as we possibly can. They did increase what was aidable in the other building, but remember, you still exceeded that by $28 million. Our goal is, we decided with the renovations and the addition would happen here, what can we do to make sure, what we're doing will receive aid and try to minimize the local impact? You know, think about that, like, their last project was $63 million, 28 million of that was receiving money. And that was really the factor in driving, the local share, which everybody saw in the numbers. Sure, go ahead.
When you said, you're only doing the minimum for BCA
That's in this presentation.
in this one.
Yeah, because we talked about last time, well, what would be included, right? So we wanted to say, look, for starters, it's this.
You pull rental amount, I think, to include the previous budget, like, it's about 40.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Mike, we proposed, I think, 14 million in renovations, 7 of which was the critical stuff.
That's the full BCA cost, the limited rental, 7.
Yeah, that sounds right, about half and half.
Yeah, half and half. And who knows where that's gonna fall on? And a fear everybody should have is once you get into this, right, every time you open something up, every time you're doing something, we know there's gonna be significant abatement. We know, you know, we're gonna have to deal with all these other adjacent pieces to anything in terms of renovations too.
I guess what I was, I thought we were doing the full BCA and not above the BCA. On the ground.
But you can speak to the scope, now, and I didn't put everything, you know, I didn't want 50 slots of everything that's listed. We wanted a flavor of the scope of the work that needs to be done. Go ahead.
What Joe mentioned before, that just like in the elementary addition, you've got an aid cap. Even when you're renovating an existing building, you have the same aid cap. It just needs to be calculated by SED. We ballparked it, so we kind of know where we think we are, around 12 million bucks. But in the way Joe did it, if this is the aid cap at 12, the BCS right now is about here. Let's call it 7.5 million. There's going to be contingencies and other things, so call it 8 or 9. So you still got a buffer of a couple $1 million that you can use as discretionary money to replace pipes or to upgrade bathrooms or do anything else you want to. And there's no reason not to, because you're getting 90 cents on a dollar. So to not spend that aid cap would not be a good idea. It wouldn't be to your advantage. That, we won't know that aid cap until we send a preliminary submission to SED. So it's months and months and months from now before we can tell you how much of a buffer you have to spend on other elements.
Right, that's kind of what we were talking about before too. Is it 7 to 14, or to Mike's point, does 14 become 12 after they look at the numbers and 7 becomes 9 by the time we submit, right? But we want to spend every penny of what we can get 91 cents back on a dollar for. So this was a flavor, I want to be clear about this, a flavor. This is last meeting we talked about, a lot of people raised, well, what's in the BCS? All these items were coded right, end of life or significant health safety issue, right? So we said this has to get done. So it's a taste of what will be the scope of the work, especially from the system side. When we get this margin left, then we can use that. Yes.
What's the longevity of these proposed renovations?
What do you put for system longevity, mechanicals,
It's another 30 years.
30 years? And which the committee discussed, a commitment to proactive maintenance and other measures that the district can take to make sure we get full lifespan. So 30 years from now, we're not leaving this problem for somebody else as well. You know, we mentioned before that these are generational kind of investments, right? It's 35 years since, especially the guts of the building, for saying lack of a better word, the mechanicals and the boilers and the plumbing, and these things have been touched. Which brings us to a point of why we have to make such a significant investment just for infrastructure.
But my understanding is that in prior years, like because of the asbestos abatement and other issues, that like replacing those mechanicals, like those pieces, that we've already come up against these budgetary constraints in the past 30 years, right? It wasn't like neglect on the state of the district.
I think personally, there's a combination of what could get done and what was necessary to be done. And even if you are doing some, I'll just give you an example. You're in a building with RTUs and you're replacing air filters and you're doing that kind of stuff. you have to be doing that, but that doesn't mean the maintenance beyond that
Sure.
could be taken care of, just like just the mechanicals in your house, the furnace in your house, the tile that should have been sealed again and didn't get sealed that time. It's got a leak or, those kinds of things. And we're going through that since 1990 and 1991, it's a long time ago. I don't want to age myself that much, but I'm sorry, David.
I think education is looking for everything you do.
100%.
It's about 7.5 million at the critical thing, you see it flows much more.
Yes, 14 plus million. Yes. Yeah.
And the other 7.5 million in here, is other than
Right, this is a flavor, which we wanted to make sure, because I really want to underscore these points that we talked about, especially for the folks that haven't been part of the work we've been doing since September, to understand we're dealing with end-of-life systems, we're dealing with structural issues, we're dealing with we're dealing with ventilation things, we're dealing with stuff that absolutely needs to be addressed. And to the committee's credit, while I want to talk about these things, we move forward, everyone can say we're doing necessary work. You're doing necessary work. And again, from a generational perspective, we're positioning out another 30 years. You know, I don't know anybody who can argue at this point to say, we shouldn't be replacing the boilers.
Right. With the exception of structural issues, and a few other ancillary deals, the 30-year time span, what we're going to expect out of this is typical of what we would have if we built a new building, correct? For the most part?
Yeah, and different systems obviously have different lifespans.
Exactly.
Interior finishes,
Between
15
years, boilers, et cetera, we have that typical type of boiler of the new thing, so these costs are going to be incurred down the road, regardless of what we're going to do or stay where we are. It's just the additional costs, structural abatements, et cetera, we'll factor into it. So it's going to be expensive, minimized hopefully through the actual maintenance, but down the road, there's going to be additional things to go.
But if it was a new building, we would only be replacing the 30 years, we wouldn't be doing.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I took the structural issues off the table for the new building. It's really the 30 to lifespan.
Yeah, from systems perspective, absolutely. And we all know, especially you, Jeff, right, renovations are more than, the new construction. We talk about it all the time. And I mentioned before, one of the buildings we just did at Cap Region, it was so much money. It was decided, let's just start over. It was the exact same kind of situation. With significant loss, with major significant structural failures and other issues too. But that's when you get into renovations and start opening things up. Then we see what we have. So just to reiterate again, because I think it's an important point, and everybody's emphasizing it. The scope of the BCS we discussed tonight is a flavor of the work that needs to get done. And I picked the items that were 1,000%. If you said, no, we're only doing 7 million, like you have to do these items if you do anything to keep the boilers on, right? To fix the ventilation issue in the cafeteria, to do all these other things, to fix the foundation, right? And plus with all that goes waterproofing and everything, and around the windows and where the bricks need to be repointed, and there's masonry issues, like all of that minimally you have to do. You got to get the envelope back to the building where it was and address anything that's leaking. Yes.
Can we talk a little bit more about this aid cap and
Sure.
this buffer zone and how it relates to that other conversation we had last month regarding the increase in tax levy with these different proposals? Can we try to compare and contrast and at least, is there an effect, a direct or indirect effect on those things? Like we were discussing like this really excessive tax levy increase for getting this building back as brand new. And then we were kind of also dabbling with this really low number to kind of do the bare bones. And there seemed to be kind of like a little bit of general consensus without giving names that maybe something in between would be a little more workable, a little more sustainable, a little more healthy.
Right.
So excuse my ignorance, but how does that tax cap buffer impact some of these levy related issues when it comes down to a vote and what people are supposed to incur on taxing?
Well, it's a couple of different things. That ceiling cap, which Mike talked about as well, of what's aided. So up to that point, you're getting aided 91% on a dollar up to there. You get above that, you get nothing. So everything you spend up here costs 9 cents locally for every dollar spent. Right, so when you get up to this cap, which the state determines, you have X amount of kids, you need X amount of space, you have this, this, and this, and this, we're giving you this many units, that translates into a maximum cost allowance of this, which includes construction and local rates to do things and that's how we get to that number. When you're at that, up to that point, you get 9 cents back, you're getting 91 cents on a dollar. So we spend a dollar under that, the local share is 9 cents. Tremendous value, tremendous value. You'll never, that's only comes to a merger. No one sees these kinds of numbers, which to Mike's point too, is we want to bring this washcloth as tight as we can up to there, because you're never going to get 91 cents on a dollar. Nobody does. Okay, and it's because of the merger. So we want to take advantage of that. Once you get above that, it becomes the local share, where it's dollar for dollar tax impact. So up to here, you might spend $10. For the sake of argument, it only costs you $1. Once you get above that and you spend $10, it costs 10. Because you're not getting 90% of it.
I think
Pay
the
for.
question is it 39 million or something?
It's broken out different based on the new construction and the renovations.
So our deliberations and discussions and trying to build consensus, most of us seem to agree that we want to use the most bang for our buck with that tax cap that we have available. The most important, prioritize things first. And I think the biggest question in our former discussions were how much, what's left, and what else do we still feel like we need to continue to bolster the programs that we've got?
I think a lot of people know that, basically this plan is 6%, 6 to 7% tax increase versus.
And as we sit here now, remember throttle around was what, 2025 or?
Yeah, so to put a
Something like
20%
that.
tax increase on taxpayers.
Right. There always will be, there's never not an increase. But think about it, you're getting 91 cents back for every dollar. So every dollar you spend, it only costs you 9 cents. Incredible that. And I think to the point, we don't know with this space, you do all this stuff, we said what was necessary. Again, call it 9 on 12, there's 3 million left. I would leave it to the architects and Josh to continue that process and say, okay, we did everything we want to do. We got a little bit left. Let's do this, this, and this. But I'll tell you, it's going to be similar things like this. Can you go back and get these pipes? We were just talking, right? Can you go back and do these other things?
And the full BCS, like new condition.
Like new condition, right?
So like,
Which-
obviously a lot of the spaces here don't need to be, they're already fairly new for.
Right, we came down, which I think when we raised this point initially, we kind of walked over it. The committee agreed that if you did the full everything, you'd be in the same boat you were before. You're gonna be here and you're gonna be spending all of this between here and here. We're gonna have the same conversation that you have last time to make all the improvements to everything on the side. You're gonna be paying out of pocket.
It was 19.3% for the full extensive reno, and then it's, this one that we're talking about now is basically 5.66.
Yeah, 6% plus or minus, based on the numbers we currently have. Which can go either way, and then we don't know what this other margin is gonna be. But as we see in the recommendation, the guidance, I think, from the committee is be cognizant of this line, right? And we're saying the committee, we get to a point which we talk about the recommendations, is everyone understands what this line is. We're recommending you don't take this line and turn it into that. You take this line on what's necessary, and we know it's gonna move. right? There's no such thing as coming right to it. I think we were a couple million over in our initial projections anyway, depending on what you wanted to do, but to be cognizant of that impact. This line is local impact.
So Joe, I guess I'm a little bit lost here. Is it our responsibility as a committee to recommend the level that we want to take it to? So we want to say, let's take it to 12%, or?
No, I think it's, the numbers move too far, and it comes back to, you're setting the guiding practices, Josh, that are recommending to the board that they should follow. And one of the recommendations was to be cognizant of that cost. And once all this work's got to get done, before you find out if it's 12 or 9 or 6, you never want to put that line in the sand, because we don't know where that line is. The guidance or the recommendation is, you know where your MCA is. We know it's probably going to be a little bit more, but you
So
need to
just
make
so-
every effort to maximize that.
Just for clarity for myself,
Sure.
it's going to be up to the school board to make that decision.
Yes, yes.
So this election coming up is pretty big.
I think everyone's, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Two important things, since there's a lot of additional people here tonight.
And it's great to see everybody again. It's not
I
like
think it's
before, but-
Brandon, a couple of quick things. You
Yeah.
reminded us a bunch of times that, the total amount of money going into renovating and putting on an addition, we're not talking about these $12 million. The total amount is up well into the 30s. Yes? So we're talking about $30+ million of additional resources going into this and expanding with this most bang for your buck reno project, number one. And number two, I think it's important just to also frame that we are talking about this referendum that we feel is a priority, which is for the school. This does not include any sort of provisions for athletic fields or a bus garage moving forward. So I just, not that that wasn't already said or outlined somewhere, just to be clear, we are talking about referendum number one.
For this bill, for the facility.
Building and making a health and safety.
Yep, absolute educational spaces. We'll talk about those other two pieces in a slide or two as well. But that's a really good point. We're talking about the investment for this, for the academic programs, for the educational spaces. And this is not, yeah,
We need to know that we're getting it this.
Yes. and this is not a small, I think it was 30, 32, 33, I mean, in the neighborhood, $1 million project, right? This isn't, a backyard do-it-yourselfer here. I mean, this is significant investment. The good news is most of that is going to qualify for 91 cents return to you. And it always shows up like you needed to pay $1, and then the next column is you got 91 cents for your cost of $1, and you got 91 cents, and your costs are 9 cents. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about capacity, because you spoke a little bit about, for instance, the special education classrooms, you said that it was going to be tight for what we need here. Is there any research into what capacity is going to look like in 5 to 10 to 15 years, whether we need it?
With special ed, you cannot do that to a large degree because of inward migration. And we already work with CPSC and the things we know about, but you never know. And this happens especially with special programs or special needs, which impacts budget and other things. Family comes to the district that has 3 children that have significant needs, and there's no program for that. That has to get dealt with. Josh, I don't know if you want to speak to the other program parts of the spaces we're using or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, special ed is one of those programs, for example, that whatever those needs are, we need to figure it out as a district. So if, based on the students that we had and their IEPs, if we needed an additional classroom, we would need to figure that out. We would need to move some things internally to make that work.
So I guess my question is, does this allow space to figure it out?
I think that there are some spaces that could potentially be flexible. I don't, you'll notice how I did not use the plural form of the word space, right? I think that, there are, not a lot, but I think that there is some, that some flexibility that,
There's flexibility, I think there's flexibility, but there aren't 4 extra rooms that we can use for whatever it might be. But there's to Josh's point, there's flexibility based on who goes where, based on where the puzzle piece gets moved to. But we're not proposing, and we've talked about this at length, anything where there's, okay, here's which kind of goes to the other question about for all them, well, here's 6 other classrooms, when we know we're not gonna get aided for them either.
But it doesn't necessarily mean you don't need.
It is, that, they're gonna say we don't need them. Unless we show up that says the program is required because of the conditions, we don't need them. We may, but currently we don't. And I hate to be, especially 32 years of education, black and white about it, but those are the conversations we have about aided spaces when they look at that and say, tell me about the program, show me your enrollment. How many are in that 412 class? Well, we're expecting, you know, maybe we'll have a 412, no, you can't have that. Or you can have it, but you got to pay for it. Sure. Yes, sir.
Well, the other thing is that these, floor plans that we're looking at for existing space, that is just how they are being used now. But there is possibility.
There's flexibility, to Josh's point. Right.
Classrooms could be reassigned or shuffled in a way that makes room for addition.
There is flexibility. Now, you know, if 100 students show up tomorrow, there's no flexibility for that. But we're talking about hopefully minor program shifts based on a student population that might change to that degree, but we're not building in capacity. We have no evidence that says we can build in capacity. We still need to know, and like just left Eric, when we go back up there, will they want another 5-year study, which hopefully will be consistent? We just did one before. Will they want another one? I don't know. Right, so that work might have to be done as well, because we're working off the existing enrollment projections too. It's a tough situation, because when they look at what will be aided and what gets allowed, it's based on what you have. And they never say you can't do that. They're just not gonna provide you any support. And it's mostly, what you see a lot are, gyms and pools and auditoriums and turf fields and all of these other things where it's a local luxury. You just won't get aided. You get aided on a cafeteria because they say X amount of kids fit in this X amount of square feet. And maybe in the school, it's, well, we want to double size that because we're going to do it. So you can do whatever you want, but we're still only going to aid you up to that point. And the committee's work was to maximize what we can get aided for. And hopefully there will be room in there once all the rest of what really needs to get done gets costed out. And this was just a flavor. But we don't know what that is until we solidify the recommendations. The board says go, pen to paper, that addition submission, be back to timeline, that addition submission needs to be in by June. It'll give a couple months to really, you know, it's a huge project, which is good. Get that done and get it submitted so approvals can happen. A lot can change between now and then. Yes, sir.
Where's the price of the file?
Total?
Yeah.
Right now, we were estimating, I think 32, 31, 32.
But speedy, you talking about 50 whole upgrades that we tested, so they're 14 million.
It's renovations, yes.
And then, fine tunes are going to be 10 million.
Don't have, but I think it was 14 or 15, I think, 15 and a half for the addition. Yeah, right, and then it's, yeah, and then you start working into the house.
The district is going to be short up for 8 months.
The addition accommodates the elementary classrooms that are coming over right now.
There's no cafeteria involved.
No, we took out, that's what we did last time. We took out the cafeteria and we took out the gym. Thank you, I can. So we cut those spaces out of the addition.
And that 14 million they refer to is if they do all of the renovations. Which is what we've been talking about, the difference between the necessary renovations and all of it. So Well, with, the idea is to, as much of the difference between 7 and 14 as we can, trying to maintain kind of that cap with the.
Yeah, you're welcome. And again, it goes back to the key is trying to maximize the reimbursement. Maximizing the reimbursement, using that coupon, you'll never get 91 cents on a dollar ever again. And we don't want to go too far above where you're getting zero on that. Again, that was a problem that was dealt with. I think a problem that the committee realized and something that the committee's worked with since last September to keep that constraint and that guideline.
Joe.
Yeah,
You did delete the superintendent's office as well.
no, those offices are still in that space. There's 3 offices for district office. Yeah, yeah, same space. Not the addition. Oh, we deleted them out of the addition.
Yeah, that's what
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, yes. They're in the existing space there, we took them out of the addition. Yes, thank you.
Plus, besides the rooms for office.
Yes, sir.
Out of the federal government, how much the state of New York received with education, you were aware of how much it is?
Billions.
I'm not billions, how much is been to revitalization and new schools that.
Yeah, I can't answer that question, but I do know the federal money is used for specific programs, and school construction isn't one of them. You might remember this going back, when was Smart Schools Bond Act? 10 years ago?
2014, 2015.
2014, 15, I don't know if everybody remembers that. There was a proposition on voting day, the state put forward, called the Smart Schools Bond Act, and they borrowed, I don't know how many billion it was, a long time ago, 15 years ago now, 10 years, where there was a vote in November where the state said they were gonna borrow money for technology for school districts. And I'm only using that example because that's how that got partitioned then. Federal government doesn't support local construction. The state does. Yeah. Yeah.
Could I also just frame or clarify that the way we got to where we are tonight, in terms of anyone asking, why aren't we planning a referendum or planning a recommendation for a proposal that includes athletic fields or bus garage? Because we have not had a viable property to have discussions about a standalone new complex. We have not had a viable property to discuss a side bus garage and athletic field. So by default, we have excluded them from this preliminary, this prioritized sort of project. And it's not as though any of us, I don't think they're not important, but when you count backwards on the time frame and timeline, in order to get moving forward on something that we believe is really important, which is to have a safe space and a sustainable place for our kids, we are having to break this apart a little bit. Is that fair?
Very fair, and actually, it's a perfect segue, because that part's in the recommendations too. So I think that's a perfect segue. So remember, sure,
So if we were to go with the program properly, but if it's like just the project, and still helping that with the community.
the committee made a decision not to go back to the 12 side. Which, another perfect segue, is the first recommendation. So, as a reminder, the committee's charged with to make the recommendation to the board for long-term facilities plan. As the charge, in so many words, the charge of the committee. So the first recommendation, which we discussed and reached last fall, is not going back to 12 under any circumstances.
That decision was made when this table was full.
Yes.
We're not full tonight, and I don't know exactly who's missing, but I do. But like, we had a full house, and that was a while back.
Yeah, and candidly, full or otherwise, it was still a committee's deliberation to reach that point. There's a conscious decision. Yeah, it was a conscious decision not to revisit that site when we spent X amount of time rehashing the failed letter. Committee concluded it was cost and it was location, and we're gonna deal with those 2 issues. So the first part of it was to make sure we take location off the table. And Tom's point as well, we searched went back through the available properties, engaged a realtor, and researched their other properties, and could not find a similar one that could serve to do a new educational facility, which is how we ended up over here. The second one is really what we've been talking about, is the committee's recommendation for the new construction here, the addition, and the renovations here as well, to accommodate the PK-12 program. Reaching number 2 is number 3 is a conscious decision to recommend all our programs will be in this building, and not to use the Lakeview campus. Also, after we went through the opportunity on that campus, the fields won't work there and their transportation as well. So to make a conscious decision not to house either of those at that campus is incredibly cost prohibitive.
So I think we need to clarify, and the committee can correct me if I'm wrong, we still need to do things ball field for the bigger.
Oh, yes, yeah, ball fields, yeah.
That's why it's a little bit confusing, no athletic field.
Maybe new, then we'll massage it to say new or further, or, yeah, and it's not like it's not your property, you use it until forever, until you decide what happens to the property. Yes, absolutely. The fourth, again, regarding the fields, a few times, to your point, we talked about this at length. Josh has had conversations with Dudley. They want to get formal agreements to continue to use that space for athletic fields. It's a solution we talked about last month a lot. We thought it would be a good solution, it would be a cost-saving solution as well. John, I'm not going to speak for you, Josh. We're going to talk about Dudley.
Great conversation with Matt Story and Evan George. I appreciate their time, and they're certainly looking to continue to work together and help us out as a district. So I appreciate their willingness to have that conversation.
And Josh, during the meeting, we're wondering if there can be something in writing so that it would just.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that was, I think really the basis of the conversation is that if we want to move forward with something, we'd really like something in writing that way and for an extended period of time. So if we were to spend money on, say, something like a scoreboard or I don't know.
Sessions,
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. If we were, as a district, spend money on that, it's not like we'd spend it and then the next year they'd say, all right, thanks, and take us out, right? That, it would be for a longer period of time. We certainly did not get into, specifics, but the general concept of long-term and the district being able to, do some improvements there, that was the conversation.
And the only downfall was transportation, right?
The transportation and, and then the piece that I have always said, I think is a negative of not having the athletic fields on site is that it really prevents any students from getting additional help after school because they don't have the ability to go to practice. But I suppose that's a transportation issue as well. So, but I think it's a solution based on the plan we have now. I think it's a solution.
Yeah.
So we also talked, tell me if I'm wrong, but we also talked that bus garage that may evolve in the future is a 100%-ish reimbursable project. Is that true?
Yes, the bus project's fully.
The bus garage is high reimbursement.
Typically, they are.
Yes, we've been accounting for it that way.
And then conversely, the athletic.
Tom, I just want to clarify. It's fully reimbursable at the 90.1%.
Depending on how to do the project.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Hey, Joe, can you just speak to that? So we're in year 7 right now.
We're in year 7, so we got 3 years left.
My understanding is that we need to have a successful referendum prior to the end of year 10.
Yeah, the community commitment, right?
Yeah.
So the 91% aid from the merger ends after 10 years, and we're in year 7.
So does the bus garage have to fit into that 10-year time frame?
Yes.
That I feel like.
I don't know if the garage would get 91%. I think we have to look into that regardless. Do you know anything about that, Eric, or no?
I don't, and of course, that's a topic where there's some changes with EV buses and so forth that we're seeing starting to relax a little bit or hints of that, so.
It's a variable.
Yeah.
So I was wrong in my numbers. I was also just trying to say that the athletic fields, though, no matter what,
No.
are there's very little reimbursement, almost zero.
Done, zero, that's zero, safe answer, zero.
The cost-effective term for the athletic field sharing with Dudley has to do with obviously building them or whatever, right? So it's cost-effective, we don't have to build them, we have a partnership, but it also isn't overly cost-effective to keep over the next 30 years transporting people, but that's a much smaller issue, obviously, right?
Yeah, the benefit of working with Dudley would be that none of that needs to go through state ed. I don't know, if being a camp, I don't know if it's like Department of Health that oversees any of that. I don't know if anything oversees construction or something like that. If you're gonna put a scoreboard in at Dudley, if we were to do it here, then some people need to weigh in on that. If Dudley, I don't know that anyone does. But the downside of that is that however long the agreement is, at the end of that, they say, thank you, it's been great. We're done with the agreement, then we lose whatever that is.
But that's calculated risk, and it's certainly a cost-effective solution. You can't make what's, necessary the enemy of what's perfect. I think centrally located fields, were a preferred option, but we were also looking at the 4 or 5 million out of pocket to have to deal with that. Yes, ma'am.
Just some clarification, because I have a memory from the Raw Dam project that the bus garage was being done first because there was some kind of man that you had to meet. Is that no longer the case?
The bus garage was being done first because of the level of aidability, I believe, that we were gonna get on the.
On the site.
Yeah, on the
It's a
site,
site problem.
on the site going in. So, and then that was also part of it, but I will say that the closer we get to 2027, which is one of the magic years in EV bus world, it seems that might get pushed back. It's more of a supply issue. Again, there's been nothing actually in writing saying it's going to get pushed back, but that's our understanding is that it likely to get pushed back.
Yeah, I think if you got that on the site first, the infrastructure for everything might have been aidable or something there.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
I believe it allowed, that road construction and so forth to be split across the transportation facility,
Yeah.
bus garage, and the academic building.
Thank
There's some, yes, sir, please.
As much as I cherish the collaboration, you can't ocean, it's a pretty good plan. Has there been discussion about the efficiency of that space of the facility? Facility access, so the facility cannot independently get to their car to leave, you need help.
So that,
Two,
Yep.
Hardwired internet, 3 bathrooms, 4 shelter in the event of, which we don't.
so we did not discuss the internet, but the other 3 were definitely discussed. I don't want to say that we have solutions, but they were discussed.
Was it discussed, that recognized university that there's massive efficiency? We had an injury this year, and we couldn't get 911 there. It was 20 minutes in with the. And
Okay.
those are real efficiencies. So that's, I want to make sure that we talk about that as a non-recurring solution of major change.
Yeah, I would, not commingle some of these operational, but if that was an issue, that's something where somebody should have a sat phone or something with a repeater on, so they can get a hold of anybody when they need to. Right, as opposed to a field situation. So I would suggest one way or the other, to look at those parts and parcels, but the committee said, well, the thought of finding the place and $4 or $5 million out of pocket into the field is just. But Dudley's committing to this long-term relationship, and part of that should be addressing all those pieces. Yeah.
We, key law, the 35 reports that we needed in the last election, which last year. We basically built own property. We just, we're going to give a base of what we have. We didn't know.
You own the field behind your engine.
What's up?
They'll say it's not a station, and we can't, I don't want to speak for whatever.
They-
It's not here.
I will
Station.
say that years ago, one of my first conversations with state ed, one of the first comments about the gym is that they're not in the business of high school athletics, was the comment I got from.
And then, like I said, we got a gym, right, the big gym here, we have this gym, you got outdoor space. Yeah, they will, yeah, they'll say they're not going to transport to,
And just the last thing, athletics is imperative to so many people in not only our students, but the entire community. We can say without doubt that many of our children and all of our community members cherish the time that they spend. And I can say without doubt that no parents or most parents are unable to attend many of the athletic events that our children attended. Can go visit, I'm sure our children attend the camp out there, and I'm sure hopefully the opportunities that they have to have the camp. But they were unable to attend the Ellis Field because it is not one facility for ambulance to get to that field. We do not currently have accessibility because 911 is not reachable. The ability for people to use those facilities, they cannot use a facility, they cannot get to the facility, and it is not okay. So those are honestly cherished memories that are equally accessible to our community members. And those times are not going to be achieved by other people that live in this community and that deserve to have those memories. I just throw that out there because I love my kids. Our parents were not able to see those times. I know how many people enjoy the lives of their children and have those beloved community entertainment to go to basketball games. I love going to basketball games and I enjoy every single second that we see those events here. But for our kids and we're have the same opportunity that so many other kids have at all of those different events. And for our family members, for people with disabilities, to not have the same experience, to not be able to access all of those things, to have internet access, to have accessibility with opportunity is not a me as a taxpayer. It really breaks my soul. It really, really bothers me. It breaks my heart that we are not going to be able to provide that for our future, younger people that want to live in this community. Accessibility has to be something that we consider as a community. If we want people to live here, to grow up in this community, and provide these opportunities for our future, I want that to be something that we look forward to. I just have to get that out.
Yeah, the only thing, I agree with everything you said about the being accessible. I just, based on however you phrased what you said at the beginning, I just want to be very clear. I'm most certainly not defending state ed stance, right? So yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure that I wasn't. Okay. Thank you.
As a community, I'm hoping that we have not been able to, when we say that this is the facilities plan, in my mind, it just isn't taken on our facilities. As the facilities, we're not being even marked as facilities, when we don't encompass everything that really is the public school, and all of those experiences count.
So the original question and answer, I think, is no. We haven't discussed the very important and should be prioritized topics at this table because we haven't had even the luxury or the privilege to have a discussion, like even hypothetically about a workable site for fields that were more accessible, more central. That just hasn't been a privilege. So the sad answer is, I wish we were having a discussion of all those things you brought up, but we haven't really. We sort of, are focusing on this educational facilities component and then taking whatever we can get, sadly, until we come up with a better space and a better plan. We're hoping to run them in the future would be my hope.
Which I understand, and at the time that we are going to lose the opportunity for that 9%, opportunity because we're going to lose that opportunity for the years.
You're still not gonna get, you're not gonna get the gate on the field, like, to put the money conversation over there, regardless of where, the fields are not gonna generate it. And part of the committee's decision was, well, what needs to get done now, we need to take a $4 to $5 million problem and move it over. And that's not to say, and I certainly agree with all your points and I appreciate it, but in working with Dudley, make our list that we need to make sure these things get addressed.
I think Dudley has more than
They mentioned that too, if I remember correctly.
Is that right, Sean?
Yeah.
We talked about for school.
Would they be able to sell a portion of the money?
I mean, I would need to, yeah, I would need to, you know, have those conversations about.
I think that is better in hand because it was too far away from the rest.
Yeah, for the academic side, it was too far away.
I mean, facilities mean, we're still gonna be talking about athletic fields, bus garage.
Well, yeah, we can talk about whatever the board says to continue talking about. Yeah, and I wouldn't look to purchase anything that I do ground lease for $1 and let them do the improvements, you don't have to worry about. Or some other arrangement.
But the recommendation is nothing.
Yes, and that after our long discussion of the last meeting too, the recommendation would be continue that Josh, have those conversations with them and look for solutions. And part of that would be, these are issues that need to be addressed.
And we're also still looking for other potential sites for a bus garage and athletic fields that we think they were closer to the traffic center of where the population exists, right?
Yeah, well, for a bus garage, yes, but you can't have 6, 8 months, however long it is now, I ever do a long-term agreement with somebody and then turn around and build field something. Right, so the decision ultimately needs to be made at some point about that. And second part, too, that we're playing that now. So it's, right, we're using these fields right, wrong, different, under current conditions. Which kind of goes to the latter point of the deficiencies should be discussed as we continue to work with Doug. And it's going to be a bigger relationship than they need to be addressed. Yes, ma'am.
As I quickly recognize what is today, I'm seeing the support that you accommodate very well here for sort of the solution itself. It was so this plan would ensure it's
I don't know, Josh, can you speak to softball at all?
I don't see this.
Yeah, so we would basically be moving all of our outdoor athletics over to Dudley in some capacity. And if you would ask me where that was gonna happen exactly, I don't know, but.
I don't know. In 1990, and this is really in 1990, when this last building project was approved, one of the biggest questions was, what about those self, we're going to tribute, we're not going to do it. And we were told, we figured it out. I just can't prepare it. Because figuring it out, just as and it was the self, it was over the jungle. And I'm just gonna say, this to me, it's just like, it's not just me, because I've seen this map. We have problems. And I'm not advocating taking over all those problems. But in the deep, it was deep to the town. It was deep as a touch for the residents who were all kinds of things. And I really see that there is at least an acknowledgement that it's been suggested. And that maybe the board maybe some time approach. You could share that facility. It is hospital, it's residents can It has been.
So I just want to comment on that. Yeah, I've had several conversations with the town supervisor. The town board is not interested in that or,
The town board is
the, according to the town supervisor, the board is not interested.
well, all right, those are two different things.
Well, let me ask this. Wait, hold on. Have you been to an Elizabethtown board meeting and had this conversation with them?
No, it is not my place to do that.
But I'm saying, I've communicated with the town supervisor who's telling me that they're not interested. So,
So is there, I'll have a conversation. Because this is up to the town board.
I mean, listen, if Elizabethtown, the town of Elizabethtown came in and said, the golf course, the golf course is for sale, great, let's have that conversation. Or that we could use a significant portion of it.
A petition perhaps should be there, so that it could be discussed, please. Because right now, we're paying for that. All the taxpayers are paying for that, and it's losing money. If we share expenses, everyone will benefit. And what we do with things like the key for the soccer team. We may need for what I know people have that. But I think it should be up to board members. But people and not many jobs. But I'd be glad to go to the board and ask. You know, your this is a petition to pass the board to consider maybe.
Certainly not a perspective, it's just about, this is the we'll see on. We Jim, the elementary Jim, the elementary. It looked like the line back and that we decided the addition could forward and not take away the stuff.
Yeah, and Mike's not here, but again, this is just concept. Once they lay everything out, they'll consider that. They'll consider everything. Yeah, and I think it's important, those are great points about the golf course, but I think it's important for everybody who hasn't been to the meetings to know that we got to these decision points because we walked through these other steps. When we talked about the golf course last fall, I think it was right, we said, find out about the golf course. And Josh, of course, found out about the golf course, and they said, no on the golf course. So there's a lot of other decisions that go into the final decision. We talked about talk about that and see what they would consider a longer term agreement. Would they consider making improvements to the site? Had that conversation and they had interest in.
Josh, did you have a conversation with the council supervisor to find out how many signatures you need on petition for them to consider?
Yeah, and the other thing that I think, and again, I'm not saying this to anyone in this room, but conversations I've had with people, I want to make sure people understand that 2 goals and a can of spray paint does not make a soccer field, right? You need to construct a soccer field. There's drainage and there's a whole lot more that goes into it.
It's still going to be, even if it's the golf course or somewhere else, it's still a $5 million project.
Yeah.
Not easy, right? So and again, put the money over here. It's just still important to remember, regardless of where it lands, to Josh's point, the site still needs to be developed for athletic fields. Now, a shared site or something like that, that's all great. But again, these are decision-making points that moved us to where we need to do to make sure we have recommendations forward to address what we have to for this building first.
Finding adequate places or spaces for athletic events is not a problem we're facing the last 5 years, or 10 years, or 15 years, or even 20 years. We're talking about going back long into the 90s, where there's been lots of discussions about trying to find fields that are better here or better there, and there hasn't ever been a great solution. So the long and the short of this is, I think in the end, the school board and Josh will develop that contract with Dudley, how they feel is best for the district. personally feel like having some flexibility in that contract would be good in case there is a utopic kind of thing that comes up that everybody can get behind. Because I think that, you know, there's a way to partner and there's also a way to continue to build our resources and our cost effectiveness in the future. So it's been not just a few years, it's been scratching it to the surface. I think it's been for a long, long time.
Oh, I'm sure, we talked, in the fall, we talked about that, you've been playing your column, right? It's not, this problem was proposed to be solved at Thrall Dam, right? That's that's really, when back in September, the whole conversation around the athletic facilities were, because part of the other side was solving that part of the problem. Can't get there for what we have, but for as long as you've been playing there, it's been a problem, right? So what the committee talked about was, okay, it's an option, we already play there. What kind of relationship can we have to make it better for everybody, especially for the kids and the spectators and the coaches and everything else? Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Do you have a suggestion? Recommended? Committee? Recommended? Thank you. Any other thoughts on the recommendations? And the last part is, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I had a question about the athletic fields. If not previous discussion, yeah, athletic field worry. Don't allow that fee. As long as they would tell us to the, at least the bus garage facility. Now, would that just the new
I
construction?
don't know, was it generating any insight or not?
I believe that if we could demonstrate that they were going to be used for a PE class, so there was like an educational component to it, not for, you know, so in theory, it would be like a gym space that was also being used for athletics.
Right.
Which is how a lot of districts get away with that.
Which is what they would do to the field in the back. The field behind this building would be considered, a PE space.
That it be,
Before the options we're looking at was a bus running facility separated from, the school building. That had the athletic fields contiguous with that because of the dating. But I don't recall that. I wasn't aware of the, you know, PE.
So, again, I'm definitely speculating here, but I think that it's the site work that would be aidable for the same reason that that we were going to do that first at Thrall Dam. The site work for the transportation facility was aidable, and you could kind of get some of that site work for the athletic fields in during that time. But if you were to just go anywhere and just do the athletic fields on their own, wouldn't generate any.
Yeah, the word, it's station is the word I was looking for. It's a gym station. It's a PE station. How many kids do you have? What's it look like? Is it a station?
That's correct, there's a 25% limit on the incidental cost and cycle, which can improve the capital cost. And that's what happened at Fall Dam, aid, because it was associated with the student. And any cost above that, as part of that 28 million, the district.
So they're treated as a PE station, right? They were treated as a PE, a part of it, 25%.
There's a cap.
Right, right.
my
Yes, sir.
reflection is that contiguous is the key.
Yeah. We talked about that before. When we looked at that other piece of property, could across the street be contiguous? We had that conversation as well. Yes, sir.
So in the BCS, would that include the outdoor spaces for the, there you want to be building thing? Did it include walking that space that will be getting?
I don't have it on front of me there. Do you have that?
Give me a minute, I'll flip through and find
Yeah,
it.
no problem, no problem.
They say that it's very familiar with space and there used to be many softball kids on there. There are mounds that are solve smaller conversations, so the student may be running along with the ball.
Oh, you know what, Eric? It might be the socket has to get moved over. So I think part of that is a full regrade.
There is what I hear by locals in the business of long time, that the old year said seven, which is underneath that field, they would six every year. It looks about 20% on stage.
That might be part of the site work.
Nothing grows there.
That might be part of the site work, but we'll have to look at all that. But I know the septic has to get moved from where it is now, everything was so that way. So it's probably gonna come out.
If we were to deem that playing space, physical education, teaching space, would be inappropriate or unsafe or just poor, would that be reconditioned practice?
It's, we could look at, it. I don't know, how about when you have good space here and you have the big gym?
Would the fence line be part of that?
Don't know.
It's clearly it's dangerous, if anybody walks out there. Sure.
Hey, Joe, can I chime in here?
Like, stay.
When,
25.
I think when they get to drawing the addition and the relocation of the utilities and stuff, we have this conversation about what can happen. That'll be the time. Let's move the central to say, okay, let's look at these adjacent spaces here. How can we grade? Let's look at this fence. And
You say great,
what's that?
you say great.
Yeah, because since they're doing, they have to move the entire septic,
Sure.
so the site's not be great. They're
Yeah,
gonna think it out,
fields
so
are-
to fix it, go ahead.
They are identified in the BCS,
Okay.
both locations.
So then I like to answer Marshall's question. It will affect us all. The building will be on its own. Line up at the outside. Well,
Go ahead. I was talking to Mike, what he said, like you said, this is just a conceptual thing, one story. Could explore the possibility of two.
And then roll in the back. Yeah.
That would save outdoor, that kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, it's a coin toss of which they'll do the math. Is the cost of the steel, is the cost of the footprint, right? So, but that's for them to figure out. But if you did 2 stories, you go down to half, probably half the size 2 stories, leave some field space. You still got to move the septic regardless. But that will get out of concept design and start getting into SD approach. Yes, sir.
Thinking of septic, we get a meeting on it. That we spoken to.
If we move forward, we'll be talking to the potential proposed maybe someday, what that looks like. But we gotta get a project here to have a conversation. Because it's gonna impact flow, it's gonna, right, they're gonna move this. And we move forward, and if it really does happen, we do have to think down the road about behind. Absolutely. But we gotta get over this, once we get past this first hump, then we can start doing the real work. on this one. Yes, sir.
With the current plan, is there like considerations for we asked this earlier, but cafeteria? I'm just envisioning elementary and middle high school all trying to eat lunch.
I think that would be a scheduling thing. Josh, I'd look to you to.
Yeah, schedule.
Yeah, the logistics of the schedule. With little younger kids in the problem, typically in a K-12 building, younger kids are working, and the older kids come in.
I mean, it's typically done that, but I believe the volume of school classroom is strictly because of the IEP environment and other things associated with it. The volume of students that will be in different classes. The total number will be the same as what we serve everybody. Additional groups are needed because of the curriculum deficiency.
Yeah, I don't see, I'm not gonna speak for Josh, a 6-year-old having lunch or breakfast with, especially lunch, sitting at a group of seniors having lunch.
But that's a big, that's a big schedule, that's considered.
I mean, there are other districts that, you know, that do the same thing. I mean, if you're asking me, have I drafted a schedule yet for this situation? I have not. Yeah.
How it affects the, on the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The teachers and
Yeah, I guess I would say that I know based on the size of our cafeteria, there are other K-12 buildings that do it, so I'm not worried about competing.
The one prior plan did have a cafeteria built in there, but cafeteria, took it out. Took the cafeteria out, took the gym out, took the administrative offices out. Yes, ma'am.
So with your original, your spin, all of the few students in faculty will be in those traditions. With one set of bathrooms for all of them, or is that just the room for like future upgrades plan for a potential
Yeah.
rescue for like pre-K classes, pre-K to 6? So in your plan, I just see one for the rescue. Not sure if you're.
Go ahead, Josh. I think,
All the rooms would have restrooms in the room.
yes. I didn't want to speak to that. 'cause I didn't know.
So when you say all the Lakeview, the special areas would not be in that.
Right, and so.
Yeah.
That's why I was concerned about, like, the music room.
Yeah, so they would still need to, so wherever the music room is, presumably they would go,
They would blend in. with-
yeah. Yeah.
So they would walk all the way up to the art room from their wing. You would walk elementary kids all the way up to the corner of the art room.
Yeah.
Presumably,
Through the high
their classroom teacher.
So,
No, that's crazy. That's crazy. You would march first graders all the way from here. all the way to here. That is minimum 25 minutes each direction.
I don't think it's quite 45 minutes.
Each direction, I will answer because I have taught at grade level.
And so have I. And walking the kids single file and coming through and just, they're walking down the hall. They're not- I do know where it is.
Grade trigger comments through.
In the middle, school, all the way.
And then go up the other stairs.
Stairs, it's a set of stairs.
I know, because that's how they could get there. I'm saying that's gonna take forever.
My experience of having a problem walking a classroom of students to different locations. They gotta walk the gym too.
No, I'm just
And
saying,
they gotta walk the cafeteria.
like, historically, that's not what they did, because historically, they all fit in this building. So what you're saying, this is unprecedented in terms of taking kids all the way from that side of the wing, all the way to the opposite corner of the facilities. And I know this is conceptual, I know that that's not permanent, but to have no specials classroom in this thing, and so to make our littles move the farthest so that they can have art and music. And right now, can someone please tell me their passing time with their schedule? Mr. Kaido, what is the passing time currently in the schedule for the kids?
It's open to passing time, it's just kind of what the teachers say.
And what is their current period time? How much time?
Mr. Caldwell, 40 minutes.
39 minutes with no passing time. So how much time are they getting for an art class with this concept?
That's not how it's discussed.
Oh, I know this is not just, but I'm saying just like conceptually, like not having any special spaces close to elementary students, but sharing the facilities with the high school, middle school students. If we have no, like, I know that, and I know there's some flexibility with these spaces.
Right.
but-
I guess it's just a couple of things that I think are really important because it goes to the field conversation as well and some of the adjacent ones. We're at this point making these decisions because of what happened last time. And the committee made conscious choices based on two things. There was a site problem and there was a money problem. How can we fix this building the way it needs to be done? So it continue to serve as a school in the most cost-effective way. That turned into having to make decisions about what can be in the box or what can't be in the box. And it goes back to the autopsy on the failed referendum with the conclusion of the local share was too heavy. How can we save costs and provide the program and get the building up to speed and replace all the systems that are expired? We made a list of needs, necessary, and wants, and we focused on what that had. having special classes in that room wasn't a priority. Go ahead, Sharon.
Sarah, this was part of my concern in asking the question about flexibility of existing spaces. And perhaps there is a way to move things around so that they're not walking that full distance. You know, is there a way to put those spaces that are being shared in a more central location?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
The assignment of these rooms in the elementary issue are not final.
Correct.
This is labeled to maximize the aid for the project.
Correct.
Those rooms in theory.
Correct.
So.
But putting anything in those rooms would displace
True.
whatever's labeled.
True. But it's designed to maximize the aid.
Correct. Correct. All the design on the committee's recommendation was to maximize the level of aid. Yes.
And there is also what, like, the 3 million of additional, like, that include, like, that's that little bit, you change some of the existing spaces.
Yeah, we don't know what the little bit, remember, you're at the MCA we're maxed out. We're already maxed out in terms of what's aidable in the new construction. We're a little bit beyond that, actually. But, again, does it change if we go to a 2-story footprint? Does that impact the field? No, we gotta get pen to paper, right? Yes, ma'am.
Do we know if the state would cover 91 cents to $1 if you were to go 2-story at a couple specialist rooms?
They have to do the math and say,
Payable or legitimate.
I
Or
don't know, do the math. There's a reason they're not in there.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, we could revisit it. But we designed strictly based on the most cost-effective approach. And that was accounting for the classrooms with the current enrollment, which can get us to 2 sections deep in each thing. Yes, ma'am.
So I have 2 questions. One, what is the capacity? Not that it's capacity. What is the capacity for that team?
Okay, and I'll get this one in.
Like, okay, how many kids would you say would fit in there?
So I made a terrible decision tonight, sitting next to this fan on this projector, and I am sorry, but I can't hear what you said.
Okay.
Capacity cafeteria, John.
Oh, the capacity of the cafeteria. Oh, Paul raised his hand. I'm gonna trust him.
Okay, so there's 365 kids in the district, not including food pay, that's your title, right? So I'm concerned, right, especially with elementary, way over here in this thing, that big cafeteria, these kids have, right? They're gonna get lunch and have to travel. Are they eating at that? There's no way for scheduling in my mind that I'm people in a room comfortably where these kids are gonna have. I think that's what I'm saying. I'm hearing you. I hear you on making a rearrange of rooms. Like I just want to expect that the cafeteria. You're really I'm saying. So I'm sure unless there's something that of a schedule that is not.
The cafeteria element and the gym and the elementary cafeteria is one equal.
So 550, so when you took your, my daughter graduated in 2013. Okay, so that's 2013, so I ran a nice number. This is again, nice enrollment data, 2012, 2013, there were 278 kids in this building. Okay, and in Westford, 200. In 2013, 2014, there were 208 kids in this building. As of 9 at okay. Well, I started July 2001, it was 479 kids. And the only thing that, I just wanted to listen. Yes. The fact that we have 9 buses in lineup in the afternoon.
I'm gonna bring the committee back to the decision making. On the recommendations, and the great idea of changing, permanent to recommended. We'll strike that. Are there any other conversations you want to have about the recommendations before the board meeting in April? Yes.
So if there are multiple recommendations that we're looking to build consensus on tonight before we leave, if that's the goal, is there another word we could use? I'm a strong supporter of PBCS, and if nothing, this is nothing other than a question about permanent. So I guess, oh, I thought you said,
Recommended.
oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, we already discussed
Recommended
that.
something else. Sorry. My bad.
Any other thoughts or conversation from the committee about the recommendations? Or add an art room, add a music room, add the cafeteria, do the fields, and then raise your taxes 20%. Okay, we'll work with this committee over the past 7 months to get to a project that does what it needs to do, that's responsible to the impact on the community. And no decision's been made to get there. Any other thoughts on the recs? I'm sure you can. I'm gonna go back to slide 32, Sean. Oh, I forgot the last one. The last one, I forgot. This has been our entire conversation about MCA. And again, it's all draft. I just tried to capture our thoughts from the last meeting. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I throw something in here?
Sure.
You know, we've got these different, like for the proposed renovations, we had different categories like mechanical and we had plumbing and electric, and there's a great list of this. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds of things. But I think that it's, I think that we need another like 4th category called safety, and sort of like touched on it, but not really. And I'm just wondering if it would be possible to have to request like some kind of like outside safety review to go through like this building, like the older building. To like, you know, come up with like a total checklist of like improvements that we could make to get this building up to like modern standards. Because the new renovation is going to have to be up to modern standards. But if this building could also be brought up to modern standards, because I think that it's a pretty big responsibility to make sure that we are doing everything we can to ensure the safety, like kind of first and foremost. Does that make sense?
Josh, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, both campuses, but certainly our focus on this campus, need several safety improvements. And I think that there is a way to do that as part of a project like this. And there's also ways to do that through, for example, like capital outlay projects, you know, where you could do that kind of every year and maybe it's a 5-year process or something like that. Capital outlay projects are smaller projects that you could do every year as part of your regular budget. But yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
Maybe if we move forward, we could certainly look at additional, like I said, we can pull out, because it's electrical stuff, we put the security stuff in with the electrical package. We can look at that stuff and hardening the entrances and the visitor verification, the other things, move that into safety thing. Josh, I don't know if you use, the CVS have health safety service?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, maybe coordinate with them.
Yeah.
And have them, make some top recommendations as we look to the renovations.
I think some items are captured in the BCS. It's not that the BCS is a specific safety focus, but you know,
Yeah,
there's items in here.
some, but I just want to make sure that the rest of the building is also captured in some way, whether it's a 5-year plan or this plan, but it's something that I think is pretty important that we take a look at.
Agreed.
Especially if we have this opportunity to sort of tuck
Absolutely.
into electric or tuck into this or that, to make sure that aspect is captured.
Yeah, I think we'll go back through and put pen to paper with some piece on it. Like I mean, the HSR service at CBS.
Yeah, and that's not something, like, I don't think we need to wait for, so if this project is successful, I don't think we need to wait for this to be done before we start that. You could really be doing it simultaneously, Yeah.
But that's a great point. Great point. We got resources, like I said, most of these specialty services where they just do health and safety. Whether it's chemical or, you name it, but all hard assets, visitor penetration, et cetera, et cetera. Anything else from the committee? Is everybody okay with the last piece here? Like I said, we just tried to capture 7 months worth of conversations, and we talked about this more than anything.
Precise
Thank you, Sharon.
explanation of.
Well, it's respectful of scope creep, right? And everybody, we worked so hard to be committed to understanding the financial impact of the last referendum. I think part of the recommendation has to be, because you've wrestled with this for so long, is this notion of you understand where the value is in terms of the spend, what the implications are going beyond. That conversation wasn't had before the prior referendum, this kind of detail. You're not saying don't, like I said, we're not setting up what they're trying to make the number. We're not saying it's 10%, 12%, it's this, it's that. It's saying be respectful, and good stewards of the taxpayers' investment in this by maximizing what you get back, first and foremost. Now we're gonna maximize what we get back with the other project, and then we're gonna spend another 28 million. So we'll just go back.
So
through.
Joe, just so I know,
Go ahead,
to push to spend more money I would need to go to board meetings to push the school board meetings on the final thing to put to vote. I'm a believer that we should spend more than what most people at this table have talked about spending. Because of hearing all the stuff, I don't want the option to be left to the vote where I'm voting on, we're gonna increase our tax rate by 7%, and that's the only vote I have.
Right.
So obviously this committee doesn't have anything to do with it, at what point can someone educate me where I can push to?
Well, after the architects do the work, when we see what the spend looks like, when we see what's complete.
Okay.
But as a committee, that we can't leave without consensus. And consensus means that we have to agree, but it means you can support. So it's important that now is the time we hash out any of the remaining differences on that and respect that, which is why I think it's important for the committee not to recommend to say to do this. And we're not saying that. We're saying recommending being respectful and good stewards of the investment. And candidly, Josh, it might be too, if we're going to do this, we'll do this, maybe something. It's 4 or 5 million. When the numbers wash out, it's reasonable. We don't know yet. But what we do know is the scope creep turns into this and that and this and that, right? So there's got to be this medium of, I know the investment be here, what I'm going to have, right? I know I'm be here with what I got to do. I'm doing some more to get to where I'm maximizing the investment, which I put in their language. You already acknowledge it's going to be over. Whatever we talked about last week, we were already over because the entire edition is native. So we know it's over. But the question, the recommendation to the board is, we acknowledge it's going to be over. We're charging you to be good stewards of what the overage is and what the investment is. Yes, ma'am.
Simply a question. They either want to say state and it's back and says, you know, there's this much more. Maybe continue to play the role or get the
I think ultimately based on the charge, that's the board's decision. When we go through this and say the board says we want to keep the committee to do A, B, and C, that's fine. But getting to this point was the charge, and then from there, it remains to be seen. Like we talked about, fields aren't, but there's things that aren't rectified, but that's really that would be the pleasure of the board in terms of next steps with that. But we won't get into the micro part once we've made the holistic recommendations. We had to send our architects, or even sitting over there, and send them to get the work, and find out where these numbers are coming from. So there's no answer for you. Maybe, maybe not. Thank you. Anything else from the committee? Let's go back through all three again. These are decisions we kind of made last fall, as we've been making the decisions as we move through the process. You know, like the wordsmith 3, I mean, you're gonna be using whatever current, they play anything, is that through softball,
No, there's baseball.
baseball? You're gonna be playing baseball, could be the next, remember, we're talking 2030, you could be playing baseball over the next 5 years. You gotta use training, right, it's not like we make this decision and then everything's done, I mean, it's your property and you're still gonna be using it. You know, but the recommendation is more about continuing to find a solution. You know, I could wordsmith 3 a little bit, that gets better for that. Doesn't sound like we're shutting a valve off, like tomorrow, oh, we're done, there's no, we got baseball there. And that's not gonna change until the other, right. I'm gonna wordsmith that, I'll send it over to the draft on number 3.
That's for the word permanent.
Or long-term permanent, yeah, long-term permanent, yeah, exactly. Not be a permanent solution for either of those options. Winner. Again, 4 and 5. Permanent's out, recommended is in. And the guidelines, which I think are fair.
So unrelated to the recommendation.
Sure, where do you want?
Having to do with, if anybody, have we reviewed the existing bus garage to see if that space, just as bus garage, is feasible to use as opposed to looking for another location? Has that been?
You really, yes, and there's options in the BCS to do that. But it's just, it's a Band-Aid on a corpse with that bus garage.
Not using
Tear it down.
the existing bus garage, using the existing space.
Well, yeah, we talked, the problem is the site there, the contamination.
Right.
We think it could, if we actually got to that point, we could do samples and look further into testing. But the initial, keep that in there. The initial first flush was the site would be problem. Because once we touch it, we gotta do everything. It's not as simple as just raising the building and cleaning it. But maybe that's a cost effective answer.
If you build a bus garage, what happens with that space?
People plan to sell it, remember, correct, Jonas?
In order to sell it, you have to clean it up.
No,
Why would you sell?
or people, or do, the list goes on. List goes on, depends if you have, unless you had a buyer and you wanted the revenue, right, I mean, that comes up in a slide or two, that there's still other things.
Yeah, parking.
Park is a great idea, but you have to clear the site.
You have to clean it up.
Yes, if you do that,
Charge for indoor parking, generate some revenue there.
indoor parking in the garage,
In the
leave it
winter,
out.
You know, great.
But there's a ton of options with that, but once you touch it, it's your problem. But if we're closing on the property in June, In the bottom, that was it, as is, they must their problems, all their problems from 1932, all their problems, as is. They don't care to turn it down, plus they're governed by DOL, but it's a lesser, it's one of the things that we need to go through with those kinds of things. That's the deal. So, but there's tons of options, I think the rec is to continue to look, continue to evaluate suitable properties. And I think if you find a suitable property, the property say, okay, look, this is gonna be an option. Are there other options that make a decision, or the board make a decision, or the board tell you to make a decision? That's why I tried to be as general as possible. We committed before, we're not gonna stop ever looking for land, even though we look to the cows come home. But the bus garage search is different, where we're always seeing a couple of the options. Okay, so just a couple of reminders, and I say this every time, all the costs, the scope, everything are estimates. I said before, I'm not gonna say, last February, you said, not gonna happen, right? That's my big asterisk. We never know about any, is it 12 million, is it 14 million, is it, why are we short 10 DAUs? Well, they said we couldn't have, can we get more? All, until the work gets done, we don't know if that's the case. And remember, the scope of the renos is gonna be up to that level, and it's a huge chunk of everything. The necessary is the 7-8 million, whatever's less beyond that. As we talked about before, we don't know Salad Lakeview eventually, right? If that's what the board decides to do. The chipping money that is gonna be coming eventually, like that deal's done. Just a projection of when the money will start flowing on that. I think there's revenue options as you look to other projects going forward to offset cost, which would make good sense. And I would also say, and I will say this at the board meeting, based on the decision of the board, I think should engage with the municipality over in Westport to talk about what they see for this property, what options they might like to see going forward too as well. Again, timeline, why this is so important. And I think that's it. So the board meeting is, I think this is right, Josh, right?
Yep.
The 10th at 6 o'clock here.
I believe it's at Lakeview.
I think it's
Lakeview.
Yep.
And I'll have a draft, I'll fix this and get everybody a copy too. So then the board can have a draft resolution of the recommendations to recognize. And I'll be there as well to walk through that. Of course, this meeting's all joint severe ballot. So we have consensus around the recommendations. Great. And that's it for now. Thank you. I've enjoyed working with you for the past 7 months, and we'll see where things go from here. Thanks.